on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. In our next episode, we are uncovering food delivery, the hidden risks and how to protect yourself.
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice. The people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, the people demand. Right to life and security. Oh, what a joy. Oh, what a peace. How great this country could be. Respecting your rights. Respecting human rights. What a wonderful nation this could be.
It's a beautiful Monday here in Kingston, and we're certainly happy to be here, and we're always thankful for our listeners who are joining us via Nationwide Radio, as well as those who are on the Nationwide YouTube platform and JFJ's YouTube platform. Thank you ever so much for your company. My name is Michael Jackson, Executive Director of JFJ.
And I'm Jade Williams, Policy Research and Advocacy Manager at JFJ.
All right, great. So I'm sounding much perkier than I am. But again, you know, when you're in good company, you have to ensure that the spirit is there and so on. But it's some serious topic that we're going to be discussing today. Under 12 and serious crimes, responding to those below the age of criminal responsibility. And while we're discussing children under 12 who commit serious offenses, I think it's going to be important for us just to reiterate, Jade, for parents who have children above the age of 12, some of those penalties, I think we have to keep reminding our children that actions have consequences, and we should, of course, ensure that we have the early intervention. So it's a very important topic for today. And we're going to be joined by Mrs. Diane Gordon Harrison, our children's advocate at the Office of the Children's Advocate, Kayla Wright, who is a program officer, attorney at law, Jamaica Youth Advocacy Network, and Dr. Clayton Sewell, who is consultant forensic psychiatrist at the University of the West Indies.
Yes.
All right.
So, in the pre-show, we normally do our Did You Know? And our trivia question for today.
Oh, and our week that was. But
yes.
You go ahead and then we jump back to that.
All right, no problem. So for Did You Know this week, we're actually looking at the age of criminal responsibility, if I remember correctly, yes. So it simply states, and this is something that we should all know, it's a part of our Child Care and Protection Act, but a child that is under 12 cannot be charged with a crime. However, the Act would allow for some intervention from the Child Protection and Family Services Agency where that child is in need of care and protection. And the Act does consider that a child under 12 committing any offense is a child that is in need of care and protection. Mm-hmm. So parents should note that a child who commits an offense at this age, below the age of 12, they could possibly be removed from the household. They could be placed in state care. That really depends on the assessment that the Child Protection and Family Services Agency ends up doing. And we'll discuss a bit more about that today as we get in with our guests. For our trivia question today, the question is, what Jamaican legislation provides for children who come into conflict with the law to be diverted from the formal justice system? So what legislation provides for children who come in conflict with the law to be diverted from the formal justice system? And if you are a fan of this show, then you would have heard us discuss this piece of legislation before. So you can send your response in the YouTube chat, or you can respond to JFJ's Instagram at JA for Justice, or you can send a WhatsApp to 239-7583.
All right, great. Yeah, the week that was, for me, was an interesting one, Jade, because our Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs caused quite a bit of a stir in the media and anxiety, I think, from the parliamentary opposition which in my estimation was quite unwarranted to some degree, because the Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, she's quite correct, and I know she came on Nationwide at 5 to clarify or to reiterate her position on this important matter. Why am I making reference to it? I'm making reference to it because JFJ, we've also made submission to Parliament around the matter of fixed date election. And it's important for us to be guided by what obtains in our constitution and what exactly the work of the constitutional reform is doing. So the minister had sought to clarify that elections are not constitutionally due by September. I have also repeated that statement, but it's not correct. The life of Parliament comes to an automatic end at September 15, because the first sitting of Parliament was September 15, 2020. And Parliament has a 5-year life period. And if an election is not, or if it is not dissolved sooner upon the advice of the Prime Minister, that's what our parliamentary system allows for. The Governor General can dissolve Parliament earlier than the 5 years. So if a Prime Minister does not have the confidence of its Parliament or want to call an election early and so on, the Prime Minister can ask the Governor General to dissolve Parliament. And that is under Section 64, subsection 2. So the life of Parliament again goes up to 5 years following the first sitting of Parliament, and that's September 15. Under Section 65 now of the Constitution is where I think the little bit of a problem came in for the parliamentary opposition, because once Parliament is dissolved, then the election must be called within the 3-month period, which again would become due in December. I think it's a wake-up call for those who weren't paying attention in the Constitution to know what obtains, because while an action may be constitutional, I think we can look at it from a governance standpoint to say if the life of Parliament goes up to September 15, 2025, are we comfortable with an election being called closer towards the end of that 3-month period? Because remember, there would be no sitting of Parliament, means that there is no parliamentary representation from our members of Parliament. But more important for me is the context that what you're going to be having is ruled by executive control. So the executive branch of government would be calling the shots without parliamentary oversight. And I think we have to ask ourselves, do we feel comfortable with that? So maybe this is an important point to note, whether or not we want our fixed election date, whether or not for JFJ our recommendation was for ECJ to call the election within that 3-month time period.
Yes.
And I think with the minister's clarification, one of the things perhaps we have to look at what we recommended to the Joint Select Committee, Jade, whether or not that 3-month window should come before the end of the life of Parliament,
yes,
rather than after. So again, for me, the minister's comments were quite appropriate because they were said within a particular context. And I would caution the parliamentary opposition, rather than beating the possibility that this may be an unconstitutional act and causing misinformation, we have to use this as a point of clarification and to raise the objection within the context of convention in keeping with democratic principles based on what I outlined, rather than the people saying, oh, the government is possibly thinking about breaching the Constitution. I think we have to be careful. But this is a wake-up call for people to get involved in the constitutional reform process. Very, very important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that, Mikkel. Always teaching me stuff about about this election election
it's
process.
Important governance issues. Yeah.
No, I agree. It's very important because I was also under the misconception that it was due in September.
Yeah, and I think people were under the misconception, not even from the first sitting of Parliament, but from when the election was called,
right,
which is September 3. And I, honestly, when I heard the media reports, I raised my eyebrow. Oh my God, what did the minister just say? No, but when I realized it was within the context of the Joint Select Committee, it was a teaching moment, a reminder, because again, I also loosely said by September. Because Dr. Barnett is correct in the Jamaica Gleaner, though. Convention is what normally we guided
will
by.
Obtain, yes.
Yeah. But
yes. So yeah, interesting. So our substantive topic for today, as we had said, is under 12 and serious crimes, responding to those who are below the age of criminal responsibility. I don't know if we have our guests on with us. Yes, we do, all of them. Okay, awesome. So thank you so much for joining us, Mrs. Gordon Harrison, who is the children's advocate, Miss Kayla Wright, who is programs officer at Jamaica Youth Advocacy Network, and Dr. Clayton Sewell, who is the consultant forensic psychiatrist at the University of the West Indies Mona campus. All right. So I think I will start with Mrs. Gordon Harrison. So we know in Jamaica that we have our... Mrs. Gordon Harrison, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, awesome.
Good afternoon to you all.
Good afternoon to you.
All right. So I know that we have our age of criminal responsibility at the age of 12.
Yes.
I want to understand. I remember a few years ago there was an issue similar to the one that has rekindled this conversation, where a child below the age of criminal responsibility committed an offense.
Hello?
Yes, are you hearing us?
Hello?
Mrs. Gordon Harrison, are you hearing?
Hello?
Okay, I think we may have had some technical difficulties there. So while we try to get her back, I will move on quickly to
Miss Wright?
Miss Wright.
Yeah, because I think the public needs to understand what does this mean.
Right. So Kayla, as an attorney, if you could explain for our audience here, when we say the age of criminal responsibility, what exactly do we mean, and what happens when you fall outside of that age, as far as you're aware?
Good afternoon. You're hearing me, right?
Yes, we're hearing.
Okay. Happy to be back on the program. So when considering age of criminal responsibility, as I think JD mentioned earlier, our criminal age of responsibility in Jamaica is 12, and we get that from the Child Care and Protection Act. I think it's Section 63, and that means that a child, once he has attained 12 years, can be held criminally liable for an act because he is deemed as having the capacity to commit an offense. Under the age of 12, it's ruled by a principle called Dole Inca Pax, which basically means that a child does not have the capacity to form criminal intent, and that's the mens rea. So in the context of the incident which rekindled this discussion, since the child was under 12, technically he did not commit a crime. Mm-hmm. He exhibited harmful sexual behaviors, but in the context of the law, that is not a crime because he's under the age of 12 and is not deemed to have had the capacity to form criminal intention.
Thank you for that, Kayla. I think as as you're saying that, I want to quickly move to Dr. Sewell, because if you are...
I think we have to take the break, no? And then
yes.
we pick up. Yeah.
All right.
Are you ready to turn your sales and marketing skills into high earnings? Nationwide 90 FM is searching for business development executives to help us grow our business and build lasting client relationships. If you have experience across all stages of the sales cycle and possess strong communication, negotiation, and time management skills with a proven sales track record, this opportunity is perfect for you. Join our team and work with the top corporate brands, media agencies, and of course, our on-air personalities. Enjoy networking opportunities, professional growth, and competitive commissions. Ready to take the next step? Send your resume to hr@nationwidenewsnetwork.com today.
Big news! The Big Bite Food Safety Show now airs on Nationwide 90 FM with your host, Alison Richards, the Food Safety Girl. Join Alison every Tuesday from 1 to 2 p.m. as she serves up expert advice, tips, and insights on everything food safety. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and remember, food safety is everybody's business. Don't miss a bite of the action. Tuesdays at 1 p.m. only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. In our next episode, we are uncovering food delivery, the hidden risks and how to protect yourself.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We're discussing under 12 and serious crimes, responding to those below the age of criminal responsibility. We are joined by Mrs. Gordon Harrison from the Children's Advocate, Kayla Wright from JAN, and Dr. Clayton Sewell, who is a forensic psychiatrist at the University of the West Indies, Mona. Before the break, Dr. Sewell, I was going to pick up with you because I heard something Kayla said, that the children below the age of 12, based on our legislative setup, don't have the capacity to understand what their actions are, or that they are committing a criminal offense. As a psychiatrist, what's your perspective on that capacity argument?
Well, the issue of capacity really relates to the individual's cognitive functioning, meaning their ability to think, to recall, to make decisions. And so that can be affected based on the person's level of development. Mm-hmm. So if they're young, the brain is developing, they're growing, they're maturing, it may not have gotten to the point where they are able to make certain types of decisions. And also in other individuals, say adults, for example, you could have issues of mental disorders or intellectual development that could cause an adult to not have the capacity. But specifically in terms of children and their development, we recognize that at up to a certain point, they may not have, generally speaking, a child may not have developed sufficiently to understand certain decisions, the ramifications of it, and to be able to determine what is, wrong or what is good versus what is bad. So hence the approach taken of, assuming in most cases that the individual, the child, has not attained the ability cognitively to be able to make some of those decisions.
So, it's some of the comments that we're seeing, especially on our nationwide chat here as we're speaking, is people giving their anecdotal perspective as to children who are below the age of 12 that they feel have the capacity to know what they were doing and therefore should have a level of responsibility for that. Is it just us adultifying the child, or is there something to that perspective?
I mean, in some cases, it can be, you're attaching adult motives to something that a child may do without the guilty mind, and intending to do wrong. But in some instances, although the age 12 is used, you can have those children who their intellectual functioning, their moral development is such that before age 12, maybe not, significantly before, but at some point before age 12, they may be able to make some of those decisions, which is why in some jurisdictions there may be a case-by-case assessment of the individual to determine whether or not there is any reason to suggest that they have attained that level of development. But in most cases, the assumption is that cognitively, say in terms of memory, thinking, decision-making, that before age 12 they haven't achieved that. And I think we should also bear in mind that some of the activities that may be carried out, which we are considered to be adult activities, are sometimes behavior that the child is modeling based on what they've been exposed to in their environment. So that is another factor to consider, the social context in which some of these things occur.
Yeah, and if we, thank you so much, Dr. Sewell. If we could go back to Mrs. Gordon Harrison, one of the issues we see coming up, and Jade made reference to it in the chat, and if you could explain from your perspective the importance of the age 12 in keeping with, for example, the conventions of the rights of the child, and perhaps what obtains in other jurisdictions, because you do have a smaller percentage of countries going as low as age 9 from recollection. What is the position of the Office of the Children's Advocate here, as you explain?
All right. So thanks for the question, Mikhail, and it's good to be on. So I want to pick up on a number of the points in response from my perspective. So the age of 12 is not a magic age, right? As you know, when these ages are being arrived at, whether they be the age of consent or the age of criminal responsibility in this case, there is a collective kind of representation from stakeholders throughout the Jamaican society with some kind of input to Parliament as to what should be that base age. We have set it at 12, but as you say, there are other jurisdictions that have gone lower. In some jurisdictions we have as low as 10, and people in those societies determine what is the appropriate age. Now, my perspective is that we have to use the 12 as a guide legally because it is what the law provides at this time. And so while I know the emotions can get very high in terms of wanting to hold, the child who is the alleged perpetrator accountable and so on, if they're below 12, my first position is that we have to respect the law, right? And we have to then look behind the kind of thinking that went into creating this particular provision. As has been said by the two previous guests, children below a certain age are deemed to be very largely the products of the adults who are grooming them, who they're exposed to in their daily life, and who they see as the examples. For society, really is the one that is molding the particular product that we see. And so, yes, the behavior is problematic, yes, the behavior is antisocial, and yes, the behavior requires a response, but the criminal justice process has not been proven to be the best place for social intervention and behavior correction, right? The criminal justice process is usually geared towards punitive measures that hopefully will result in some rehabilitation. But what we say from the perspective of the Office of the Children's Advocate is that because minors, particularly those of tender years, and we're saying below 12, are the product of their parents, of their community, of their environment, we have to look at the behaviors behind what they're doing that we're complaining of in this particular instance and see how we can disrupt that social molding that would have exposed the child, first of all, to the problematic behavior and then would have emboldened the child to do what it is, that is being complained of in a particular instance. So that's how we like to look at it in terms of having corrective intervention instead of going first for the punitive.
Thank you so much. I want to share some statistics as we have a conversation. And this particular statistics, it's for ages 12 and over, just to put in context, however. But I just want to paint a picture of the crimes that we see being committed by our youngsters. So we got some information from the JCF. So I'm going to be sharing two sets of statistics for our guests and our listeners. For rape, and I'm going by year 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. So for rape, 5 in 2020, 7 2021, then 11, 39, 43, total of 105. Indecent assault, 3, 2, 16, 11, 16, total 48. Then for grievous sexual assault, 3, 11, 29, 38, 40. Those are for sexual offense crimes that children were charged from the JCF. And if I could also put in context now from the child diversion data, we had over about 1,452 children diverted. They were not charged, diverted from the criminal justice system. And of that amount, 64% were for offenses most frequently referred under the Sexual Offences Act. 42% of those were for children having sex with each other under the age of 16, that offense. But what is concerning though, 20% of those matters for which children were diverted were for more serious offenses, rape and grievous sexual assault. So again, while I was speaking most generally for children aged 12 and over, you get a sense that children are committing serious sexual offenses. And I think the question is, and perhaps we could start with Dr. Sewell and then Kayla and Miss Wright and then Mrs. Diane Gordon Harrison. How do we reach our children before the age of 12? Because this is sending a signal that children are committing more serious offenses. So, Dr. Sewell?
Yes. So in terms of reaching the children, I think it first requires that we identify the factors that may be contributing to some of those behaviors, because in some instances, say in the case of sexualized behavior, they are being exposed to it, whether in their immediate vicinity of the home or through other means. And I think identifying that will help us to be able to put interventions in place to limit exposure to those potential factors. Mm-hmm. Additionally, they are themselves, some may be victims of sexual acts, and as I said, just continuing that cycle. And so it requires, I believe, interventions in the home, in the community, and in the wider society to negate that, and therefore to change some of the norms that have been established in our society, where issues of a sexual nature are being glorified or being encouraged, particularly to minors, where they are exposed to some of these things through entertainment and through social media and that sort of thing. And so an intervention in that regard would prevent some of these occurrences. Additionally, where an individual has engaged in that, and as was mentioned by Mrs. Gordon Harrison, that the approach is more of a rehabilitative one than a punitive one, so to help to prevent this continued cycle. And so if you are acting then in the best interest of the child, it's important to then put in place interventions that help to manage the mood and behavioral issues that they may have that led to them carrying out these acts, and to put their parents as well, and as I said, the community, through programs that can help them to become better parents and more supportive and less likely to carry out inappropriate acts or traumatic acts of neglect or abuse to their children. And so those interventions are necessary, in my opinion, if it is that we're going to prevent those any recurrence of these acts by other children and also those who have already committed these acts, because having done so, there is a potential for increased number of these acts in those individuals going forward. So a preventive approach can be successful, in my opinion.
Thank you so much. We have to take the break, but after the break, I want to pick up with Mr. Wright and then Mrs. Gordon Harrison. And from you, Mrs. Gordon Harrison, specifically the information around the child diversion and the rehabilitation bit, and we take Mr. Wright's response to some of the data that I just shared and what exactly can be done. But we take the break.
At the Jamaica Customs Agency, we care for our employees, customers, stakeholders, citizens, and our country. Customs cares. The temperature by the Jamaica Customs Agency is
30 degrees Celsius here in Kingston and 29 out west in Montego Bay.
Tune in to Cliff Hughes Online on April 16 from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. as we broadcast the groundbreaking ceremony for the Raintree Commercial Development. Raintree Commercial Complex aligns with UDC's goal of developing urban spaces. On 108 acres at Block 1, it will offer commercial and light industrial opportunities, creating 2,000 short-term and 5,000 long-term jobs, benefiting the Caymanas community. So tune in to Cliff Hughes Online on April 16 from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. for this groundbreaking activity. It's the groundbreaking ceremony for the Raintree Commercial Development. Also catch the live stream on Nationwide's YouTube channel at Nationwide Live 2. All this and more only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. This broadcast is brought to you by the Urban Development Corporation.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We've been discussing under 12 and serious crimes. We've been joined by Dr. Clayton Sewell, Miss Kayla Wright, and Mrs. Gordon Harrison. Kayla, I'll just pick up with you. Your perspective on the data that Mikkel shared and how we can do some early intervention work to try and catch these children before they get here.
Okay, so definitely, I was writing it down even for rape 2020, 5, 2021, 7, 22, 11, 23, 39, 24, 43. And as Mikkel said, it's indicative that or children that have attained the age of criminal responsibility are indeed committing serious sexual offenses. So you can assume that children under this age are exhibiting those behaviors. I'm in agreement with Dr. Sewell, especially regarding involvement of parents in like engagement tactics and education, and of course community training, particularly because, and he also said it earlier, we have to consider the environment of the child who has committed these harmful behaviors. Children don't exist in a vacuum. Proper assessment into the adults around the children needs to be done, and assessment into the other children they're interacting with needs to be done. Assessment into the media that the child is being exposed to and allowed to consume needs to be done, and properly using these factors to inform the means through which the child will be held accountable, and overall informing the responses to the incidents. But it's really troubling statistics, especially because when these incidents come up, we find that we don't know where to go. And that's because we're not proactive in the formulation of our policies and legislation. So we're scrambling and off many minds as to what to do to respond to these incidents when nothing really comprehensive exists on our books to deal with children under the age of criminal liability who express these harmful behaviors, harmful sexual behaviors. And in addition to educating the parents and community, at JAN, we advocate very strongly for the inclusion of comprehensive sexuality education in schools. A principle within which, or upon which CSE stands, is that it should be age appropriate. So it's important that all children are introduced early and in an age appropriate manner to ideas of harmful behaviors. When I was in school, primary school, we learned about good touch, bad touch. Maybe getting back to those roots and not only identifying what is good touch, bad touch, but also ensuring that the curriculums and address not being perpetrators of the bad touch either.
Good. Mrs. Gordon Harrison, the question, as you respond to the statistics, I wanted your perspective more so on the importance of rehabilitation and the child diversion program, the early intervention. What is your perspective as you listen to some of these statistics?
So I think the statistics highlight the need for the early intervention and also the need to ensure that we are what I like to call upending or right-ending these children who we have some concern about. It cannot be that we say, all right, they're under the age of criminal responsibility, so we'll do nothing until they do this at 13, and then we can divert them, right? So we need to be looking at intervention at the early stage. And for me, what I'd like to put on the table is not just the parent education and the education for, members of the community and the typical, sexual and reproductive health education, but more importantly, character education. So let us have it woven into the curricula of our various schools, where we're not just talking about good touch, bad touch, but we're looking at the very basic elements of respect, the elements of understanding the sanctity of each person's body and the right not to interfere with personal space, because that now is disrespectful. And if you're not interfering with personal space, it means that you understand and you respect the autonomy of your fellow classmate, and you understand and you respect that a woman has the right to her body, a man has the right not to be touched at a certain place. And so we get beyond just the good touch, bad touch, but we elevate it now to a level where youngsters understand appropriate interaction with colleagues, with classmates that is respectful, that understands boundaries, and that would be appalled if certain things are done. Because from where I sit, if there is that basic understanding of how to operate in a social space, then we wouldn't even be thinking of touching someone on the breast or on the buttocks. So that's the first thing. The second thing, now, to answer your question more specifically, is that rehabilitation has to be at the forefront of juvenile justice. Because what we want to do is ensure that we're not warehousing criminals, right? We want to ensure that when an impressionable age comes up on the radar as having done something that is potentially criminal if it's below 12, or actually is criminal if the child is 12 and over, what are the underlying factors? But more importantly, can we rescue this impressionable mind, turn the mind around to understand the inappropriateness of the behavior that is of concern, and then use rehabilitative methods, whatever those may be, because I am very firmly of the view that rehabilitation is not a platonic kind of blanket approach. It has to be when you assess the situation and circumstances of the particular child before you in the context of that child's social kind of family setting, and against the background of the behavior that we're concerned about, what is the best rehabilitative path to put this child on? Because what we want to do is rescue portions of the juvenile population that can be rescued to ensure that they become positive members of the population and eventually grow up to be well-adjusted and contributing members of society. So rehabilitation is a path to reintegration on what is the socially accepted spectrum that we want to see all of our young people, and in fact adults, kind of progressing towards, because only then will we have a society that is well infused with people who are thinking right and who understand how to operate in a social setting.
Thank you for that, Mrs. Gordon Harrison. Very insightful perspectives.
I'm
that
just
we've
here
been
nodding
sharing.
my head.
Yeah.
There's complete agreement, yes.
Yeah. But as we close this discussion, I think I'll ask each of our guests to give their final perspective on this topic, their last words to our audience, to the parents, the children out there, on this issue. So I'll start with you, Mrs. Gordon Harrison, and then we'll take Miss Wright and then Dr. Sewell.
Okay. So just to say that I think we are beyond the knee-jerk reaction. When something happens, everybody is in, mayhem, and we say all these things. But let us step back as a society, examine the fabric of our society and the communities that make up our nation at this time, and see what influences could be propelling the behavior that we're concerned about. And let us forget knee-jerk and focus more on long-term interventions that will shift the behavior kind of modeling that we're seeing at the societal level that is sometimes causing these youngsters to choose these inappropriate and antisocial paths.
Thank you so much. Miss Wright?
In full agreement with Mrs. Harrison, I'll take this perspective from, I'll say, the legal framework. So maybe amending the existing framework that we have. So the Child Diversion Act, the CCPA, to explicitly provide structured interventions for children under 12 who engage in harmful behavior. So this comes with developing a non-criminal, of course, therapeutic interventions. Also stressing the importance of a multi-agency approach to situations like this. And just essentially, we just need to develop a protection framework for child victims too, of violence by child perpetrators specifically, in a way that protects the victims emotionally, physically, and even academically, while also recognizing that the child perpetrator is also a child. So we just need to have those protection framework in place.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Finally, you, Dr. Sewell.
Yes, including what I would say is that we understand the society's call or need for justice. But that has to be balanced by a recognition that, particularly among children, that, it's hurt people who tend to hurt people. And therefore, we still need some compassion in dealing with children who have committed offenses. We have to be rehabilitation focused in our interventions, while at the same time ensuring that the victims of these acts of violence get some attention as well. And as was mentioned, identifying the factors that may contribute to some of these acts, addressing them as best as we can within the appropriate legal framework to ensure that all involved, the victims and the perpetrators, have their best interest in mind.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all our guests for joining us on this topic.
Really appreciate it.
Yes, really appreciate it. And it was very insightful for us.
Yes. All right. Have a good day, everyone. Take care.
Right. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Jade, I that most unfortunate and heartbreaking incident that happened where the 11-year-old would be the perpetrator in that context, and a 6-year-old child. My heart goes out to the family of that 6-year-old, because I just can't imagine what the family is going through at this moment. And I hope the child is getting all the intervention that can have that child rise from this, for lack of a better word. The support to the family, the mother, so that the mother can also cope as best as one can in this particular situation. I've also taken note of the commentary on social media calling for death penalty for the 11-year-old. Thankfully, our law doesn't allow that. Can't impose death penalty on a child, anybody under age 18. But I think we're so quick for harsh penalties that we don't take the step back for the balance that our guest called for earlier. So we should empathize, sympathize with the family and all victims. But as Ms. Wright in particular rightly said, the perpetrator in such context is a child. And we must always seek to strike the right balance and do the early interventions that our guest spoke of. But I also want you to know, Jade, age 12 and over. I think every time we do a topic like this, we must remind parents of what the age of criminal responsibility means within the context of the type of offenses that we see our children committing. So we know age 12 and under 14, a child can be convicted and serve a term of imprisonment of up to 25 years. Age 14 and under 18 years old, you can serve a term of up to life imprisonment.
Yes.
Some of the more common offenses that the children tend to commit in school, I'm not sure if you remember some of them off the top of your head, Jay, but if you can dig in memory for me.
Yes.
The fighting.
Yes, so we have the assault. Sometimes it is assault occasioning bodily harm, depending on how serious it was. The sex with a person under the age of 16, illegal possession of an offensive weapon, which sometimes, and I want to remind the kids of this as well, is that offensive weapon can include replica weapons as well.
Like a ratchet knife,
yes.
and sharpening tail comb and so on.
Yes, so when it is that you carry these items in your bag, and we all know that you are no farmer, so you need not have any large knife in your bag, that is something that you can be arrested for. And one of the concerns that you should have as children, also as parents, is that a child can look at a mandatory minimum sentence for some of these offenses. So it's something to be very careful about in terms of ensuring that your children do not come in conflict with the law. Not every child can be offered child diversion, as we discussed it. That's very discretionary, and you should not assume that because you are a minor that you will be
it's
diverted.
Automatic.
Yeah.
So it's just to put things in context, parents. teach our children conflict resolution, because you see that fighting one and the assault, when I look on the child diversion, that is one of the offenses. Having consensual sex, between two minors, you see that one popping up a lot. So we just have to be minded as parents, teach our children the concept of consent. You don't rub down nobody leg and hope that the person change them. Listen, these are serious things,
Yes.
If you hear the horror stories all the way up to university, what happens on campus and so on. So we have to be teaching our children these things early on. I should one day bring some primary school teachers on the show to explain to you some of the things that you hear happening. Not in high school, no. Primary school babies, what they're doing. And it's not TV we're watching here, right? So I speak frank, Jade, you know this.
Yes,
so it's very, very important for parents to understand and explain these things to their children. We have to take the break, but on the other side, we will pick up Indicom, increased police fatal shootings.
Tune in to Nationwide at 5 on April 8 from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. as we broadcast the launch of the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra. We hear that the new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra has a stunning design with flashing fast 5G and an AI-powered camera that transforms your photos. I wonder what other feature it has. Find out on Nationwide at 5, April 8 from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. It's the launch of the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra. Catch the live stream on Nationwide's YouTube channel at Nationwide Live 2. All this and more only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. This broadcast is brought to you by Smart Mobile Solutions, your gateway to technology.
Big news! The Big Bite Food Safety Show now airs on Nationwide 90 FM with your host, Alison Richards, the food safety girl. Join Alison every Tuesday from 1 to 2 p.m. as she serves up expert advice, tips, and insights on everything food safety. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and remember, food safety is everybody's business. Don't miss a bite of the action. Tuesdays at 1 p.m. only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. In our next episode, we are uncovering food delivery, the hidden risks and how to protect yourself.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. I don't think we're going to be discussing the Indicom's quarterly 4 report as much.
No.
Because remember the last time we had Commissioner Faulkner on the show, while the report itself was not yet finalized, we went through a lot of the information in that time period, recognizing that the year ended with 189 fatal shootings, most of which were committed by the police. But some things jumped out at me in that report, Jade, that for me I want us to quickly touch on, some of which we had spoken to Commissioner Faulkner. I think there were, 4 matters during the quarter that were recommended for charges to be laid.
In the last quarter.
In the last quarter. And even when we look at the previous quarter, I think for the entire 2024, there were 28 matters recommended for charges to be laid. But let me focus on the last quarter, given that's information we more readily have at hand. So don't quote me, but I think it is 28 for the entire year.
Because when I looked at the last quarter, we summed up the year.
Okay, I have this bad habit of speaking off the top of my head. All right, so, but when you look at the period, I want the listeners to put in context this information. For all the matters that were recommended for charges to be laid, in terms of murder, no. Only one of them was for 2024, and that is for the triple fatal shooting at Windward Road in November 2024. So when we look at the year, the incident year of all of these matters, 2020, 2021, 2022, and a few for 2023. And by the way, these are just charges being laid or charges recommended to be laid. Ruling, yes.
Ruling.
A very important distinction, because I think the next question we're going to have to ask ourselves, how many of them charges were actually laid? We can distill that from the report. But how many of them saw commencement of the matters being prosecuted and then the conviction rates? So I think sometimes when we sound an alarm, I really urge the public to put these things in context in terms of matters being adjudicated before the courts, the type of justice that families will be getting. I always go back to Matthew Lee, for example. There's a pretrial readiness hearing today, and that incident was 2013?
Yes, 2013.
Matthew Lee was killed.
Yes.
And the matter is not yet concluded.
Yes.
Yeah?
Funnily enough, even in that same final quarter, 2024 Indicom report, one of the matters that were ruled for charge by the Office of the DPP was from 2013 in terms of the incident date was from 2013.
So the person killed in 2013 and is just being ruled?
Yes, for charges in 2024.
So let's put things in context, the listeners, when we make these calls. And I think we can I'm not sure if there's anything else that jumped out at you, Jade, for 2024.
A few things, but we can pick it up.
The 40% of them resulting from planned operations, nobody worn cameras. And then when we look at 2025, I think there was a triple fatal shooting today.
Yes, I think last night.
Last night, okay. I stand corrected. But today's number, April 7th?
Yes, April 7th.
We're now, the triple fatal shooting is in fact today.
Okay.
So we're now at 90 persons killed by law enforcement as at April 7. So January, we had 28 killed. February, another 28. March, 25. And as at today, April, 9 persons. That's a total of 90. When we compare that to the corresponding period of 2024, that's 36 people.
Yes, 13 in January, 9 in February, 13 in March, and as at the 7th, 1 of April. That's
a whopping 150% increase. And remember now, 2024 had an increase compared to 2023. 2023 had an increase to 2022, 2021. So you're seeing not just a steady increase, a significant increase. And I had spoken on JFJ's behalf to say that if this trajectory continues, we're looking conservatively at ending the year with 250. And I think we can adjust that number, Jade, to say 300.
Yes.
And the last time we saw such high numbers, let me move beyond the 2013 258 now. If we are to go to 300, the last time we saw such alarming numbers was in 2010. Mm-hmm. That was a period. Because the years prior, you had 200s. In 2010, you had 300 and something, and then the 70 thereabout who were killed in the Tivoli incursion. So we have to ask ourselves, is this number acceptable and appropriate? And while JFJ, we make no pronouncement on these matters, we can't kid ourselves, because of that 2024 189 police fatal shootings, we know that 2 officers were in fact charged for murder.
Yes.
For 3 individuals. And that is because the incident was caught on CCTV.
Yes.
So when we sound these alarms, we have to be minded. And I really ask the Jamaican people to join JFJ in the call of the body-worn cameras being worn by law enforcement. Not just at the traffic lights. But if we're saying that 40% of planned operations contribute to 40% of the fatal shootings, we must start asking ourselves these questions. certain questions because it's an increase. It was 20% the year before, and now 40% of the 189 was as a result of planned operations. We must probe, and I really urge us to join the call. Body-worn cameras. Our good police commissioner, Dr. Kevin Blake, says that we have 750. We have to start asking ourselves, none of those 750 just happen to be worn? When you have a Zones of Special Operations Act that says, as long as the resources can allow, we should be wearing body-worn cameras. Some of these incidents happen in these communities, you know.
Yes.
But no footage. Huh? We have to ask ourselves and ask the police commissioner these questions. If it is that we said that we need improved data storage infrastructure, what is the timeline to have that done?
Yes, because quite frankly, having been following the body-worn cameras and their implementation since about 2019, we have been hearing comments on the necessity of the infrastructure. So at what point will we have something in place that is representative of that infrastructure for the cameras to be? Because as we keep procuring them, because we would have heard procurement plans also in the sectoral debate last year from the Minister of National Security, and the year before that, and the year before that. So looking at all of those plans for procurement each year, at what point do we ensure that we have the facilities in place to use these items that we are repeatedly procuring?
Yeah. You know, and I think it's appropriate now for the listeners to be made aware that we are planning a protest.
Yes, we are.
Against the increased fatal shootings that we're seeing. And that protest will be held on Tuesday, April 29, between 1 to 3 o'clock. And each week we're going to be reminding the public, asking you to join us. And it's going to be within the vicinity of the Halfway Tree Transport Center.
Yes.
These numbers are too alarming, and I think we must all take a stand that yes, we support the JCF and the JDF. We love to see the numbers trending down, but we should never, ever substitute certain things for reduced accountability. We want to see a better Jamaica, but it cannot come at the expense of lack of accountability. And we need those body-worn cameras. So I urge the Jamaican people to join us on April 29. We've gotten the permission from the JCF already, yes? So
Yes,
we can make this announcement.
Thank you so much for that, Mikel, and for rekindling our important conversation on this matter. I think as we close the show, we'll say our trivia question for today was on which legislation allows for children to be rehabilitated when they commit offenses. And the answer for that was the Child Diversion Act. The winner was News Commentator. So News Commentator, you know the drill. And we will reach out with your prize. But thank you so much for participating. And thank you to our listeners for joining us this week. I'm Jade Williams.
I'm Mikel Jackson. Have a good day.
For justice, the people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention and police brutalization. Class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or JamaicансForJustice.org.
The people's champion.
Tune in to Cliff Hughes Online on April 16 from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. as we broadcast the groundbreaking ceremony for the Raintree Commercial Development. Raintree Commercial Complex aligns with UDC's goal of developing urban spaces. On 108 acres at Block 1, it will offer commercial and light industrial opportunities, creating 2,000 short-term and 5,000 long-term jobs, benefiting the Caymanas community. So tune in